Men speak of wealth as though it were an object to be seized, pursued, or overtaken through exertion alone. Yet in all my observations of nature, I have never witnessed an effect that could be commanded by force while its cause remained unattended. Wealth, like electricity, does not respond to desire, nor to urgency, nor to effort expended in disorder. It responds only to alignment. A conductor does not plead with the current to flow, nor does he chase it across space. He prepares the circuit, removes resistance, establishes continuity, and the current appears as a natural consequence. In the same manner, money enters human life not as a reward for striving, but as a response to internal calibration. The error of most men is not insufficient effort, but effort applied without harmony, which produces heat, noise, and exhaustion, yet no sustained power. When a man thinks of money as something he must acquire, he has already declared separation between himself and the very thing he claims to want. This declaration is not philosophical, it is functional. Thought is a form of energy, and every thought carries direction. When thought is shaped by need, it emits a signal of absence. When it is shaped by urgency, it introduces instability. Nature does not amplify unstable signals. A system vibrating in hunger repels equilibrium, just as an erratic oscillator cannot maintain resonance. Wealth does not move toward desperation, because desperation is disorder, and disorder cannot hold accumulation. The universe is economical in its operations. It delivers effects only where structure exists to receive them. I have spent my life observing systems that failed, not because power was unavailable, but because the internal arrangement was unsuited to transmission. Men live in a similar condition. They labor, they calculate, they compete, yet their inner state is fragmented, contradictory, and noisy. One part of the mind seeks gain, another fears loss, another doubts worthiness, another anticipates delay. This internal interference weakens the signal before it ever leaves the individual. To such a system, wealth appears unpredictable, sporadic, or unjust, when in truth it is merely responding with precision to the quality of the broadcast. No machine receives a clear transmission while its components vibrate at odds with one another. Understand this clearly. Money is not intelligent, moral, or sentimental. It is responsive. It flows toward coherence, stability, and continuity, because these conditions allow it to remain, multiply, and circulate without loss. Where there is confusion, money passes briefly and departs. Where there is fear, it hesitates. Where there is frantic motion without order, it dissipates. This is not punishment, and it is not favor, it is law. Gravity does not inquire into merit before it acts. Electricity does not discriminate between the skilled and the unskilled. It follows the path prepared for it. Wealth behaves in the same manner, though men persist in attributing personality to it in order to avoid examining their own alignment. The pursuit of wealth is therefore a misunderstanding of cause and effect. Chasing implies distance. Effort implies resistance. Strain implies misalignment. When a man strains for money, he confirms that it is not naturally positioned within his field. When he speaks constantly of effort, sacrifice, and struggle, he conditions his nervous system to associate wealth with tension, and tension degrades precision. No instrument produces a clean tone when its strings are over-tightened. No engine performs optimally when it vibrates beyond tolerance. Calm is not passivity. Calm is stability. Stability is what allows energy to accumulate instead of escaping as friction. Observe those individuals for whom wealth appears to arrive with minimal disturbance. Their secret is not luck, nor inheritance, nor moral superiority. It is internal order. Their thinking is settled. Their expectations are unhurried. Their actions arise without conflict. They do not negotiate with reality from a position of need. They operate from assumption. They expect continuity, and continuity responds. This is why the same external opportunity produces abundance in one man and disappointment in another. The difference lies not in the opportunity, but in the receiver. A tuned circuit draws power effortlessly. An untuned one wastes it as heat. To think in terms of alignment is to relinquish the illusion that wealth is persuaded by intensity. It is not volume that carries a signal far, but coherence. A whisper, properly tuned, travels farther than a shout distorted by noise. When you remove the internal posture of need, you remove resistance. When you cease to regard money as a solution to discomfort, you stop broadcasting discomfort. This quiet adjustment alters everything without spectacle. The mind settles, decisions clarify, timing improves, actions become fewer and more accurate. From this state, wealth begins to appear not as a dramatic event, but as a sequence of confirmations that something internal has stabilized. This first understanding is not intended to inspire you, but to reset you. Wealth is not impressed by ambition, nor attracted by pleading. It is drawn by harmony, maintained by order, and multiplied by continuity. Until this is understood, all methods are noise. Once it is understood, the chase ends, and calibration begins. The moment you stop reaching outward and begin adjusting inward, the field responds. This response is not emotional, and it is not immediate, but it is exact. Money follows alignment as reliably as current follows a completed circuit, and it does so without announcement. I am calibrated internally, and wealth responds to my order, not my urgency. Wealth cannot enter a system that is internally disordered. Not because it is withheld, but because disorder cannot sustain accumulation. In every machine I have studied, instability produces loss, leakage, and breakdown. The same principle governs the human instrument. A mind that oscillates between confidence and doubt, a body governed by irregular habits, an emotional field disturbed by reaction and impulse. These conditions do not merely slow progress, they actively interrupt flow. Money, like energy, requires containment. Without internal order, whatever arrives departs as quickly as it came, leaving the individual convinced that abundance is unreliable, when in truth it was never properly held. Internal order precedes all durable outcomes. It is not created through force, nor through rigid control, but through consistency. When thoughts are allowed to scatter, when emotions are indulged without regulation, when routines shift according to mood, the signal emitted becomes fragmented. Fragmentation produces inconsistent results. A system that cannot maintain a stable frequency cannot expect stable returns. This is why many experience brief surges of income followed by collapse. The surge is mistaken for success, the collapse blamed on circumstance, yet the cause resides in the unresolved chaos within the operator of the system. Clarity is the first requirement of order. A man who does not know what he is doing from one day to the next, who changes direction frequently, who entertains contradictory desires, creates interference within his own circuit. Interference weakens transmission. It is not necessary that goals be numerous or ambitious. It is necessary that they be clear and non-conflicting. Precision in thought reduces friction. When the mind stops arguing with itself, energy becomes available for creation instead of correction. This availability is felt as calm, and calm is the precondition for reliable output. Emotional regulation is not suppression, it is governance. Emotion is energy in motion, and unmanaged motion produces turbulence. Turbulence disrupts signal integrity. A man who reacts constantly to events external to him allows his internal state to be dictated by noise. Noise degrades frequency. Markets fluctuate, opinions shift, outcomes vary. Yet the individual who allows these movements to disturb his internal equilibrium forfeits his capacity to remain aligned. Wealth favors those who remain internally steady while external conditions oscillate. Stability is not indifference, it is control of response. Routine is often misunderstood as limitation, yet in nature repetition is the mechanism by which strength is built. A muscle grows through repeated contraction. A circuit stabilizes through continuous operation. The human nervous system calibrates itself through predictable rhythms. When sleep, nourishment, work, and rest occur without order, the system remains perpetually reactive. Reaction consumes energy without producing structure. Structure is what permits accumulation. A man who lives irregularly should not be surprised when his financial results mirror that irregularity. Disorder also manifests as excess. Excess thought, excess consumption, excess stimulation, excess explanation. Each excess introduces friction. Wealth requires efficiency. Efficiency is not haste, it is economy of movement. When unnecessary activities are removed, when mental clutter is reduced, when attention is directed rather than dispersed, the system becomes capable of holding greater charge. This is why simplification often precedes expansion. Before capacity increases, resistance must be eliminated. The removal of excess creates space, and space allows energy to remain instead of escaping. Many attempt to increase income while ignoring internal instability, believing that more money will resolve disorder. This inversion guarantees disappointment. External gain cannot correct internal confusion. It amplifies it. Money entering a chaotic system magnifies chaos, just as higher voltage amplifies weakness in a poorly designed circuit. True growth proceeds in the opposite direction. Order first, then expansion. When the internal arrangement is corrected, the external response follows without strain. The sequence is unalterable. To recognize internal interference is not an accusation, it is an opportunity. Every source of disorder identified is a point of leverage. Each stabilized habit strengthens signal integrity. Each regulated emotion reduces noise. Each clarified intention sharpens direction. Wealth does not require intensity, it requires coherence. When coherence is established, results become predictable. This predictability is what men mistakenly call luck. In reality, it is simply the visible effect of internal order made manifest over time. Internal order is the foundation upon which stable wealth is built. The strength of any signal is determined not by its intensity in a single moment, but by its consistency over time. A brief surge of current may illuminate a filament for an instant, yet it cannot sustain light. In the same manner, a fleeting belief, an occasional surge of optimism, or a temporary decision to think differently produces no lasting effect. Wealth responds only to stabilized frequency. This is why men who alternate between confidence and doubt experience alternating results. Their signal rises, collapses, rises again, and the environment responds accordingly. Nature mirrors persistence, not enthusiasm. Thought is not a passive event. It is an emission. Every repeated thought reinforces a pathway, strengthens a pattern, and establishes a rhythm within the nervous system. When a thought is repeated without contradiction, it gains coherence. Coherence increases signal strength. When a thought is repeated while being undermined by fear, skepticism, or impatience, the signal cancels itself. This cancellation is not subtle, it is exact. A system cannot transmit two opposing frequencies simultaneously without distortion. Most men unknowingly sabotage themselves by rehearsing a desire while emotionally rehearsing its failure. Consistency is misunderstood as effort. It is not effort, it is agreement. When thought, emotion, and expectation move in the same direction without interruption, repetition becomes effortless. The mind no longer negotiates. It confirms. This confirmation stabilizes the signal, and stability allows the environment to respond. Wealth does not answer occasional certainty. It answers sustained assumption. An assumption held long enough ceases to feel like belief and becomes a reference point from which action naturally arises. Emotional neutrality plays a critical role in signal stabilization. Excess excitement introduces volatility. Excess fear introduces contraction. Both disturb frequency. Neutrality is not indifference, it is balance. A balanced system transmits cleanly. When a man thinks of wealth without emotional disturbance, he has removed resistance. He is no longer pushing or pulling against the outcome. He is allowing the frequency to establish itself, uninterrupted. This calm repetition is far more powerful than dramatic affirmation or emotional intensity. which exhausts itself quickly. Repetition must occur without contradiction. A thought affirmed in the morning and doubted in the afternoon weakens the entire structure. The system learns inconsistency. It adapts to fluctuation. Results then fluctuate. This is why many claim to practice positive thinking while remaining financially unstable. Their repetition lacks integrity. Integrity is alignment over time. When a thought is repeated consistently, the mind adjusts perception to support it. Opportunities previously unseen become obvious. Decisions previously resisted become natural. Behavior shifts quietly, without command. The duration of repetition is as important as its content. Frequency stabilizes through continuity. A signal held briefly does not alter structure. A signal held persistently reshapes it. The nervous system, the habits of perception, and the patterns of response reorganize around what is most consistently impressed. This reorganization is gradual and invisible, which causes impatience in those who expect immediate confirmation. Yet once stabilization occurs, results appear with regularity. They do not surprise, they confirm. Men often mistake repetition for monotony and abandon it prematurely. They seek novelty, intensity, or variation, believing these will accelerate results. In doing so, they reset the system repeatedly, never allowing frequency to mature. Wealth, however, accumulates through compounding effects. Compounding requires time and uninterrupted continuity. A frequency interrupted cannot compound. A signal constantly altered cannot strengthen. What remains unchanged long enough becomes dominant. Repetition is therefore not a motivational exercise, but a structural one. It is the method by which thought becomes state. State becomes behavior. Behavior becomes outcome. When repetition is clean, calm, and uninterrupted, the outcome becomes predictable. Predictability is the signature of alignment. Where predictability exists, wealth begins to respond reliably. Not because it has been summoned, but because the conditions for its presence have been sustained. Sustained thought without contradiction creates the signal that wealth responds to. Imagination is commonly dismissed as fantasy, yet this dismissal arises from a failure to distinguish between uncontrolled imagery and disciplined visualization. One is noise, the other is calibration. Every machine must be tested in advance of operation, every system simulated before execution, and the human mind is no exception. Imagination, when governed with precision, becomes a laboratory in which frequency is adjusted before it is expressed through action. It is not a place of escape, but a space of rehearsal. Nature itself imagines before it produces. Patterns form invisibly before they appear as structure. To misunderstand imagination is to surrender one of the most exact instruments available to human intelligence. When an image is held clearly without strain, it imprints a pattern upon the nervous system. This imprint is not symbolic, it is functional. The brain does not sharply distinguish between an experience vividly imagined and one physically encountered. Both register as instruction. When imagery is vague, contradictory, or emotionally charged with longing, the instruction becomes distorted. When imagery is exact, calm, and repeated, it becomes directive. The system begins to orient itself toward the imprinted state without conscious effort. This orientation is what men later call intuition, timing, or instinct, though it is simply alignment responding to a trained pattern. Precision is the difference between fantasy and function. A man who imagines wealth as an abstract condition teaches his mind nothing. Abstraction produces no usable signal. A man who imagines with sensory accuracy, emotional neutrality, and temporal stability instructs the system how to behave. The image must be specific enough to be believable and stable enough to be held without effort. Excess grandeur weakens credibility. Excess detail creates strain. The correct image sits quietly in the mind, accepted without debate, like a remembered fact rather than a hoped-for event. Imagination does not replace action, it prepares it. The mind rehearses the state so the body may execute without hesitation. When an outcome has been internally familiarized, the actions required to reach it feel natural rather than forced. Resistance disappears because the system recognizes the destination as already integrated. This is why disciplined visualization reduces effort. Effort is required only when the system is uncertain. Certainty removes friction. Friction consumes energy. The absence of friction conserves it. Sensory involvement strengthens calibration. When the imagined state includes weight, texture, movement, and environment, it recruits the full circuit of perception. This recruitment increases coherence. A partial signal produces partial response. A full signal organizes the entire system. Yet sensation must remain measured. Excess emotional stimulation destabilizes the frequency. The objective is not excitement, but familiarity. Wealth must feel ordinary before it becomes durable. That which feels extraordinary cannot be maintained. It produces vigilance, fear of loss, and unconscious withdrawal. Imagination must also be rehearsed without temporal pressure. To imagine an outcome while monitoring how long it should take introduces urgency. Urgency disrupts calibration. The image must exist independent of time, held as a state rather than an event. When time is removed, the system relaxes. Relaxation allows repetition. Repetition stabilizes frequency. Frequency, once stabilized, begins to influence behavior without instruction. This influence appears as subtle shifts in choice, tolerance, and expectation that accumulate quietly. Many misuse imagination by attempting to force emotion rather than establish form. Emotion is not required for calibration. Coherence is. A clear, unemotional image repeated consistently has greater effect than an emotionally charged image repeated sporadically. The former trains, the latter exhausts. Training reshapes structure. Exhaustion produces collapse. Wealth requires structural change, not emotional peaks. The disciplined mind understands this distinction and applies imagination as an engineer applies simulation, not as a dreamer escapes reality. Imagination must remain obedient to internal order. If the image contradicts routine, identity, or current capacity, it creates internal resistance. Resistance weakens the signal. The image should stretch the system gently, not rupture it. Progression is lawful. Calibration occurs in stages. Each stabilized image prepares the ground for the next. Skipping stages produces instability. Stability produces accumulation. This is not limitation, it is efficiency. When imagination is used correctly, it ceases to feel like imagination. It becomes reference. The mind no longer asks whether the state is possible. It assumes continuity. From this assumption, behavior aligns without coercion. Opportunities are recognized without seeking. Decisions are made without hesitation. Action flows as confirmation rather than effort. The image has done its work. It has trained the frequency to which wealth naturally responds. Imagination used with precision trains the frequency that produces wealth. Urgency is commonly mistaken for motivation. Yet urgency is a distortion of signal, not an amplifier of it. In every physical system I have observed, haste introduces error, and error increases resistance. When a man approaches wealth with urgency, he transmits instability. His thoughts accelerate beyond coherence, his emotions fluctuate, and his actions lose precision. The system responds accordingly. Wealth does not arrive faster under pressure. It becomes erratic, delayed, or fragmented. Calm expectation, by contrast, stabilizes frequency. Stability allows the signal to travel without interference, and without interference, response becomes reliable. Detachment from lack does not mean indifference to outcome. It means the absence of emotional contraction around the idea of money. Lack is not defined by external circumstance, but by internal posture. A man may possess little and yet not vibrate in lack if his expectation remains settled. Another may possess much and yet remain bound to fear, constantly anticipating loss. The first remains open to accumulation, the second unknowingly restricts it. Wealth cannot remain where it is constantly monitored with anxiety. Observation infused with fear alters behavior, and altered behavior degrades results. Urgency arises from the belief that time is an enemy. This belief is false. Time is a neutral dimension through which all lawful processes unfold. Seeds do not grow faster because they are watched, nor do they mature sooner because they are desired intensely. They respond only to proper conditions sustained over duration. When a man accepts this, impatience dissolves. He ceases to measure progress emotionally and begins to measure it structurally. This shift alone removes a significant source of internal resistance, allowing frequency to stabilize further. Emotional detachment is therefore not withdrawal, but refinement. Emotion is not eliminated, it is regulated. When emotion remains steady, the signal remains clean. Fear, anticipation, and excitement all introduce oscillation. Oscillation weakens coherence. Wealth responds best to a signal that does not fluctuate with circumstance. This steadiness is perceived externally as confidence, though internally it feels like neutrality. The individual is no longer negotiating with reality. He is maintaining position, and position exerts influence without effort. Detachment also corrects behavior. A man free from urgency does not rush decisions, overextend resources, or accept unfavorable terms out of fear. His actions become selective. Selection increases efficiency. Efficiency increases return. This chain does not depend on personality or background. It depends on emotional regulation. When fear is absent, clarity emerges. When clarity emerges, action becomes economical. Economy of action conserves energy. Conserved energy compounds. Compounding produces wealth. The elimination of urgency also removes the habit of comparison. Comparison is a form of distraction that fractures frequency. When attention is directed toward others' outcomes, it leaves one's own system unattended. The signal weakens. Progress becomes reactive rather than intentional. Detachment restores focus inward, where calibration occurs. From this inward focus, external results realign naturally. Wealth does not require awareness of competitors, it requires fidelity to one's own signal. Many abandon alignment because they mistake calm for stagnation. They interpret the absence of dramatic movement as failure. In doing so, they reintroduce urgency and disrupt the very process that was beginning to stabilize. True progress often feels quiet. It lacks spectacle. It produces subtle confirmations rather than immediate transformation. Those who understand this remain steady. Those who do not interfere with their own advancement. The difference is not discipline, but understanding. When detachment is complete, expectation replaces hope. Hope contains uncertainty. Expectation contains assumption. An assumed outcome does not provoke emotion, it guides behavior. Behavior guided by assumption is efficient and consistent. Consistency strengthens frequency. Strengthened frequency produces response. The chain is intact. Nothing is forced. Nothing is chased. Wealth enters as a confirmation of internal stability, not as a prize for emotional exertion. Urgency and lack destabilize the signal that wealth requires to form. Time is not an obstacle to wealth, yet it is frequently treated as one by those who misunderstand its function. In nature, no process of accumulation occurs instantaneously. Charge builds gradually within a capacitor. Strength develops through repeated stress and recovery. Growth proceeds through cycles that cannot be compressed without consequence. Wealth follows the same law. It appears slowly because alignment itself requires stabilization, and stabilization requires duration. To demand immediacy is to misunderstand the mechanics at work. Time is not delay, it is the medium through which structure is formed. When men observe wealth emerging over years rather than days, they often conclude that something is wrong or that effort has failed. This conclusion arises from impatience, not evidence. The internal frequency may be correct, yet insufficiently matured to support scale. Early manifestations are often small and quiet, not because alignment is weak, but because the system is still reinforcing itself. Premature acceleration destabilizes what is forming. Nature protects emerging structures by growing them slowly, so they may endure without fracture. Compound alignment is rarely recognized while it is occurring. Each repeated thought without contradiction strengthens the signal. Each calm decision reinforces coherence. Each consistent action reduces resistance. None of these appear dramatic in isolation. Together, over time, they transform the entire system. This is the principle of compounding applied not to money, but to alignment itself. Those who interrupt the process by changing direction, abandoning discipline, or reintroducing urgency reset the accumulation, and then wonder why progress feels circular. Delay is often misinterpreted as rejection. In reality, delay is adjustment. When outcomes do not appear immediately, it indicates that some component of the system is still correcting. To remain calm during this period is essential. Emotional disturbance during delay introduces interference. Interference prolongs delay. The man who understands this does not react. He maintains position. Position, once held long enough, becomes influence. Influence alters conditions. Altered conditions produce results without strain. The impatience to see evidence is itself a form of mistrust. Mistrust destabilizes frequency. Trust is not belief, it is consistency without emotional fluctuation. A system that trusts its calibration does not monitor constantly for confirmation. Monitoring introduces urgency. Urgency introduces noise. Noise weakens signal. When the need for reassurance is removed, the signal strengthens and response accelerates naturally. This acceleration is often mistaken for sudden luck, when it is simply delayed coherence reaching critical mass. Gestation is an unavoidable phase in all creation. The unseen precedes the seen. The internal precedes the external. Wealth must be prepared internally before it can appear externally. This preparation includes patience without doubt. Doubt short-circuits compounding. Patience preserves it. To remain aligned during apparent stillness is a mark of understanding. Stillness does not mean inactivity. It means stability. Stability allows accumulation to continue uninterrupted. Time also tests alignment. That which is assumed only temporarily dissolves under duration. That which is truly integrated remains unchanged. This is why wealth gained rapidly through speculation or force often disappears. The internal structure was insufficient to support it. Wealth that arrives after sustained alignment remains, because it is supported by a system capable of maintaining it. Endurance is not accidental, it is structural. When patience replaces impatience, effort diminishes. Action becomes timely rather than frequent. Decisions improve. Resources are preserved. The system becomes economical. Economy produces surplus. Surplus accumulates. Accumulation becomes wealth. This sequence cannot be rushed, but it can be trusted. Time does not work against alignment. It completes it. Those who understand this cease resisting delay and begin cooperating with duration, and in doing so, they remove the final obstruction to sustained abundance. Time is the medium through which aligned frequency compounds into wealth. Action is often mistaken for proof of progress. Yet action taken without alignment is merely motion, and motion alone produces no lasting result. In every efficient system, movement follows calibration. When internal order is established, action emerges naturally without strain or compulsion. It is not summoned by willpower, nor driven by fear of stagnation. It appears as the next obvious step, taken without debate. This is the difference between forced productivity and aligned execution. One exhausts the system. The other conserves energy while producing measurable effect. When alignment is incomplete, action feels heavy. Decisions require effort. Initiatives are delayed or abandoned. The individual attempts to compensate by increasing intensity, mistaking pressure for progress. This pressure introduces resistance, and resistance degrades precision. In contrast, when frequency is stabilized, action feels light. There is no internal argument. The mind does not negotiate. The body moves without hesitation. This is not impulsiveness, it is inevitability. The system recognizes the action as coherent with its internal state, and therefore does not resist it. Aligned action is economical. It avoids unnecessary steps. It selects accurately. It does not scatter attention across multiple directions. This economy is often misinterpreted as laziness by those who equate busyness with value. Yet in physics, efficiency is defined by maximum output with minimal loss. The same definition applies here. When alignment governs behavior, effort decreases while results increase. This is not coincidence. It is the natural outcome of reduced internal friction. Behavior serves as confirmation of frequency. A man aligned with wealth does not need to convince himself to act in ways that support it. He naturally chooses environments, conversations, and opportunities that reinforce accumulation. He declines distractions without resentment. He delays gratification without struggle. These behaviors are not imposed. They arise from clarity. Clarity eliminates temptation, because temptation feeds on uncertainty. When direction is clear, deviation loses appeal. Action that emerges from alignment carries timing. Timing cannot be forced. It is perceived. A man who acts prematurely interferes with formation. A man who hesitates excessively allows opportunity to pass. Aligned action occurs in the narrow window where readiness and circumstance coincide. This coincidence is not luck. It is perception sharpened by internal order. The system recognizes when movement is required and when stillness is more efficient. Both are forms of action when properly aligned. Those who act compulsively often do so to escape discomfort. Discomfort signals misalignment. Acting to escape it compounds error. Aligned action, by contrast, is free of urgency. It does not seek validation. It does not announce itself. It proceeds quietly, steadily, and with purpose. This quiet movement accumulates influence over time. Influence produces leverage. Leverage amplifies results without increasing effort. This amplification is what men observe as momentum, though it is merely the visible effect of sustained alignment expressed through behavior. Effortless execution does not mean absence of discipline. Discipline remains, but it is internalized. The system no longer requires enforcement. Habits align with intention. Attention remains focused. Energy is not wasted correcting deviations. Correction becomes rare because deviation becomes unlikely. This is the stage at which productivity ceases to feel like labor and begins to feel like expression. The work reflects the state of the worker. When action confirms frequency, feedback accelerates. Small results appear. These results reinforce assumption. Assumption strengthens alignment. Alignment refines action. This feedback loop tightens without strain. Each cycle requires less conscious effort than the previous one. The system learns efficiency. Wealth responds favorably to such systems because they are reliable. Reliability invites opportunity. Opportunity multiplies effect. The sequence is lawful and repeatable. To force action before alignment is to place load on an unstable structure. To wait indefinitely without alignment is to stagnate. The correct position lies between these extremes. Alignment first, action second. Action then becomes the natural extension of internal state, not a desperate attempt to manufacture outcome. When behavior aligns fully with frequency, wealth no longer feels distant or elusive. It appears as the inevitable byproduct of a system functioning without resistance. Aligned action emerges naturally and confirms the frequency that produces wealth. Wealth, when fully understood, ceases to be a future condition and becomes a present state of being. This does not imply possession in a material sense, but position in a structural one. A man aligned with wealth does not wait for permission to feel settled, nor does he postpone authority until numbers confirm it. He occupies a frequency that assumes continuity, stability, and sufficiency as natural. From this position, outcomes organize themselves without demand. The system no longer asks whether wealth will arrive. It functions as though arrival is implicit, and implication is the language through which nature responds most efficiently. Inevitability is not confidence expressed outwardly, but certainty integrated inwardly. When alignment is complete, there is no internal discussion about worth, timing, or permission. These questions dissolve because they belong to an earlier stage of calibration. The mind rests, the emotions remain regulated, the body acts without hesitation. From this condition, wealth does not appear dramatic or transformative. It appears appropriate. Appropriateness is the mark of alignment. That which belongs arrives quietly and remains without resistance. To live as one already aligned with wealth is not to ignore reality, but to interpret it correctly. Reality is not the immediate appearance of circumstance. It is the lawful response to sustained internal order. A man who waits for evidence before assuming alignment reverses cause and effect. Assumption precedes confirmation. Confirmation follows assumption. This sequence cannot be altered. Those who understand it do not seek reassurance. They maintain position and allow response to occur in its proper time. Calm authority emerges naturally from this state. Authority is not asserted, it is perceived. Others respond differently. Opportunities present themselves with less friction. Decisions require less deliberation. These changes are subtle yet cumulative. They signal that the system is no longer broadcasting uncertainty. Wealth responds to authority because authority implies stability, and stability allows accumulation without disruption. This is why those aligned with wealth appear unhurried and composed even as their influence expands. Completion is not an endpoint, but a condition of maintenance. Alignment must be preserved, not celebrated. The moment a man becomes impressed by his own progress, he introduces noise. Noise degrades frequency. Frequency must remain clean. Cleanliness is maintained through continued order, repetition without contradiction, emotional regulation, and disciplined imagination. These are not practices to be outgrown, but foundations to be retained. Wealth remains where maintenance is understood. Those who reach this state do not speak often about wealth. Speech is unnecessary, where assumption is established. They do not attempt to prove alignment, because proof is irrelevant. The system speaks through results. Results speak softly. They accumulate quietly. They remain. This quiet permanence is the signature of inevitability. What is inevitable does not announce itself. It simply arrives. When alignment is complete, fear of loss disappears. Loss belongs to instability. Stability does not anticipate collapse. This absence of fear further strengthens frequency. Strengthened frequency attracts opportunities that require trust to accept. Trust is extended naturally to those who embody it internally. Wealth circulates through such individuals because circulation requires confidence. Confidence is a structural property, not a personality trait. In this final understanding, wealth is no longer pursued, managed, or defended. It is expressed. It reflects the state of the system that holds it. The man aligned with wealth does not identify as wealthy because of what he owns, but because of how he operates. Ownership is temporary. Operation is continuous. Continuity is what wealth recognizes and responds to. When continuity is established, the process completes itself without further instruction. To remain here requires nothing additional. No effort is added. No technique is intensified. The work is finished when alignment is sustained without strain. From this position, wealth is not a goal achieved, but a condition maintained. It is no longer sought because it is already present as function, behavior, and expectation. The system is closed. The circuit is complete. The response is inevitable. I operate from a stable frequency, where wealth is a natural and inevitable state of being.